future. Last week, the US president said he'd hold talks with the Russian president in Budapest about the war in Ukraine. Former head of the Foreign Office, Lord Simon MacDonald, told LBC he hopes Trump sees what Putin's doing.
He has been played by President Putin, but as this happens again, I hope that he's seeing that. And so when it happens another time, his reaction will be more subtle than it has been the last 3 times.
A third survivor of child sexual abuse has quit her role in the National Inquiry into grooming gangs. The woman stepped down a day after 2 other victims, warning there's not a genuine understanding of the scandal. The US Vice President J.D. Vance says ceasefire plans in Gaza are going better than expected as he met Israeli officials in Tel Aviv. That's despite 2 IDF soldiers being shot at the weekend. And Boris Johnson's told the COVID inquiry the closure of schools must be a last resort for any future pandemic. The former PM said he wished he could have found another solution during the height of the outbreak. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed up 23 points at 94.26. The pound buys $1.33 and €1.15. LBC weather, showers easing for most this evening, a few lingering along western coasts and in the far north, lows of 3 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, very good evening. It's 3 minutes past 8 on LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's Tuesday's Cross Question. On the panel with me, to my right, Baroness Rachel Maclean, Conservative peer. She's former Director of Strategy for Kemi, Badenoch, and a former Housing Minister. Calvin Bailey is over to my left, Labour MP for Leyton and Wanstead. He's former RAF Wing Commander. Next to him is Jemma Forte, broadcaster and co-host of the podcast The Trawl. And to my right, Liam Halligan, an economist who writes for the Sunday Telegraph and also is a podcaster. His podcast is called Planet Normal. He's here waiting for your normal questions or even abnormal questions. We do sometimes get some abnormal ones. The number to call if you'd like to put a question to our panel, 0345 6060 973. And as usual, you can watch us live on Global Player or the LBC app.
0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Let's go to our first questioner. It's Sarah in Snowdonia in North Wales. Hello Sarah.
Hello, Iain Dale. Thank you very much for taking my call. It was thanks to Nigel, your producer.
I haven't got a producer called Nigel. But anyway, carry on.
Well, he's called Nigel anyway, he said.
Okay.
Anyway, so I was a teacher for a quarter of a century, and I now am in receipt of £1,000 a month. That's it. That's what I get. And
what, from your teacher's pension?
Right now, yeah, from my teacher's pension. I'm sitting here in a fleecy cover because I can't put the heating on because I can't afford it. My council tax is £300 a month, and my income is £1,000 a month. So I get very, very little from my apparently gold-plated pension that your former caller said that the country can't afford. And yet I gave a quarter of a century of my life to bringing up children and educating people.
Do you not get a state pension, or are you too young?
No, I'm too young. I had to give up work because I'm disabled also, but I don't get anything for that.
So you get no disability benefits at all?
I get PIP.
Right. So your basic question is...
Why do you think it's not affordable to pay teachers who have given their lives to the young people? You can't even give them the pension that I paid into. Mate,
so did the taxpayer. I mean, the taxpayer pays, as our previous caller said, 28.9% of the salary into...
It wasn't.
Well, that's what it is now, apparently.
That's nonsense. Well, it wasn't when I was...
Well, it's not nonsense, I'm afraid. That is what is paid in.
You actually do regret the fact that I get a pension at all of £1,000.
Not at all. That's not what I've said. Anyway, let's put it to our panel, Liam.
Well, public sector pensions are an absolutely enormous liability, but that doesn't take away from the fact that in certain individual circumstances, whether people work part-time, for instance, that often leads to a low pension. If they retired...
I didn't work part-time.
Can I just answer, please? Can I just answer? Do you mind? Thank you. In certain circumstances, obviously, people won't have the pensions that they think they deserve. On the other hand, the kind of final salary pensions that a lot of public sector workers get are now completely extinct in the private sector. Almost nobody starting a job in the private sector now receives a final salary pension. That's a pension that's a multiple of your final salary when you actually leave. And it's not necessarily the fault of recipients. Of course it isn't. The big mistake we've made, Ian, with public sector pensions over many years, as some of us have been writing about literally for a quarter of a century and more, is that we don't fund those pensions the way you'd normally fund a pension. Normally, the money that's been put aside by taxpayers, and you're exactly right, that's the percentage that's paid in that you mentioned, that should go into an investment pot that's then invested in shares and bonds and stocks and gets a return and benefits from compound interest. But very unusually for an advanced Western economy, particularly one with the big financial services sector, we don't have public sector pensions for the most part that are backed by investments. They're just paid for out of current taxation. It's completely insane. It's a Ponzi scheme. And the trouble is, public sector pensions have been grotesquely badly mismanaged for many, many years because everyone who decides policy on public sector pensions has a public sector pension. So there's no incentive to actually sort this problem out properly. And a big problem that we have is that when our system of public sector pensions was designed, average pay in the public sector was lower than the private sector. That is no longer the case. Average pay in the public sector is now higher than the private sector. And also when they were designed, people would work for, say, 20 or 30 years, as our caller has, and then, with all respect to them, they'd retire for 10 years and then they'd die. Life expectancy now means that an awful lot of people who've worked in the public sector are receiving the pension for longer than they actually worked. And that is obviously completely financially unsustainable. So with the best will in the world, again, not taking away from service that people have given for 1 second and not wanting them to be in financial dire straits in their retirement. I'm not saying that at all. But this has to be affordable, and pension ages have to go up in a way that reflects longevity. And quite simply, Ian, particularly in the public sector, where trade union influence is very, very strong, and ministers themselves and MPs get the same public sector pensions, those retirement ages have not gone up in a way that I would say is financially responsible, given that 4/5 of the public do not work in the public sector. They work in the private sector, and they've got to pay for all of this.
Jemma Forte.
Overall, it feels like the subject of the triple lock and pensions. It's almost like political handcuffs, isn't it? Anybody mentions anything to do with pensions and everybody's like, I remember a lot of conjecture over the winter fuel payment, which I think we all agree was a complete mess. But within that, when you were talking about it going to millionaires, as well, or people like perhaps my parents who were very, they understood that they probably shouldn't have it. It was just sort of a benefit and they didn't need it. There was room for discussion. And I feel like we're never allowed to have these really sensible discussions. I am way, way, way closer to pension age, sadly, than I am to being a youngster.
This cannot be true.
It is. I know, right? But
not a grey hair.
Funny that. There's a wonderful thing called hairdressers, which is why I've got no money in a flipping pension. So the point is we're sort of going into this area now where our population, it's almost like an inverted pyramid. It's just a fact. And something it probably maybe isn't sustainable. And another thing, I remember a friend of mine, it was just an anecdote, but he was saying about how his mum was on a cruise in the winter, sort of moaning about having her winter fuel payment taken away. And you look at youngsters coming in, there's sort of stagnant wages, very little opportunity, massive rents. The young people, I've got young kids, university sort of age and so on. Their friends, and my goodness, they're going to be living with their parents, with me, till whatever age. So at some point, there's got to be a frank conversation about not necessarily that teacher, for instance, that sounds like she's surviving on very little. I don't know how to implement it in a way that is means tested, but it seems to me there needs to be a conversation.
But it is politicians who are refusing to have that conversation, because I've lost count of the number of politicians that come into this studio on this programme sometimes, and they'll say, no, but the triple lock is safe with us.
Yeah.
Then as soon as the red light goes off, say, well, of course it's got to be.
Yeah, because they're
addressed.
scared of the electorate, because it's mainly older people who vote, and they wonder why there's so much apathy amongst young people, because they're just not catered to. They're just not really talked about. And, again, even if you take maybe 10 years below my kind of age range, I'm going to do all of this without giving my age away.
Teenagers.
Yes. I don't think they're considering pensions at all. I hear people, honestly, my peers saying things like, what are we going to do? Do we get a commune? What do we do? Like, it's looking pretty bleak. It's not looking like it was for my parents at all. And I'm sandwiched in between my parents, who aren't like what I would describe as wealthy, but they're having, as they blooming should, as everybody should in an ideal world, they're having a decent retirement where they can afford to live. And it doesn't look like that for my peer group. It certainly doesn't look like that for youngsters. Youngsters who are going to be needed so desperately to work in order to pay for these pensions.
Okay. Rachel Maclean, I don't know if you were listening at the time, but when you were working with Kemi Badenoch, she came and did a phone-in on this programme, and somebody phoned in and started questioning this issue. And she sort of said that she would have to consider the pensions triple lock. And within 2 minutes of the programme ending, Labour were on it like a rat at a trap. And it's never been mentioned since in Conservative Party policy. Do you not think that all parties, not just the two big parties, but all parties have got to come to terms with this? It's got to be grasped.
Well, I mean, I actually didn't listen to that, but Kemi has announced a lot of other policies which, taken together, are being honest about the public finances and the need to constrain public spending. Obviously, the caller is she's one individual, so she cares about her own situation. But if you're a political party, you aspire to go into government, you have to think about the public finances more broadly. Pensions, as Liam has set out, is one aspect of it, but it's also all the other aspects that are contributing to the fact that we're spending out more than we're actually receiving back in, such as we've got too many people who are not working at all because they're being signed off with sickness benefits. We've got too many people actually being thrown out of work due to all the ridiculous policies that the Labour government's bringing in around employment. We got policies that are destroying business and employment more generally. If we fix that, then of course we can protect some cohorts of society, such as pensioners who've worked all their lives, if that's what we choose to do. I mean, I don't know whether it will be what we choose to do, but there's no point just picking out one policy on its own and saying, we have to keep this, and then, we have to make ridiculous sacrifices everywhere else. You have to look at it in the round, and that's what we are starting to do now as a party, to set out everything on a costed basis, to be honest about things and say, look, no, we can't afford to have uncapped benefits for children, for example. We're the only party that said we have to cap those benefits.
Isn't the problem that we all know that pensioners tend to vote in higher numbers than other generations? So a political party that doesn't cater for pensioners in some way commits political suicide, particularly the Conservative Party. So if you were still an MP and the Conservative Party came up with a policy of abolishing the triple lock, and you were in a marginal seat, and you would have found that a very difficult thing to sell to your constituents.
Of course, there's always going to be policies at heart. We had to sell the rising of the pension age. We had to sell the fact that there were some women who missed out because they'd not reached certain cut-off thresholds, and the so-called WASPy women. There are a lot of women in my constituency who felt that they'd really been badly done to. But as an MP, I couldn't do anything about that because it was a government decision from years ago, and it would have cost billions to overturn. And actually what my constituents also wanted was decent schools, hospital roads, maternity care, and so on. So anyone from any party can't just promise everybody everything, or they can, but it's complete fantasy. That's not our party. That's not the values that we stand for.
Calvin Bailey, the Prime Minister's made it clear the triple lock is safe under Labour. Is there any part of you that thinks that, well, in the long term, that is not a wise decision?
Well, the thing is, so part of the reason why we're having this discussion is that, when Liam set out his proposition and when we're discussing why this is an issue, it's because everyone else has had such a significant degradation in their own standards and cost of living and they haven't seen, the public sector hasn't seen appropriate increases in pay.
Liam's saying that public sector workers are now paid higher than private sector.
They are, on average, they are.
They are, and that's what you get with a Labour government, is that it's
been like that for about 15 years.
That we recover some of the balance. But stagnation has meant that people's wages have remained suppressed. And so we are attacking, just as Rachel says, people are attacking all of the benefits that are on offer, and the benefits are much broader than the things that we normally describe as benefits. So the first thing is to just understand that we have these discussions because we're under duress because of the terrible state in which the economy was handed over to us. So what do we do going forward? Well, we've made a commitment to triple lock, and we stood through that last year. We explained, and I was quite upfront to explain, that $6.5 billion increase. So pensioners this year, we'll see over the course of the short time that I've been in Parliament an increase of their pay for about £1,000, which is a significant uplift over this course of the year. And when we're having discussions about difficult decisions, I found it really difficult to understand why such emphasis was placed on the winter fuel when that was £1.5 billion and this is £6.5 billion. The government was fundamentally doing something right and taking a difficult position. Now we've adjusted where we are, and we have adjusted and will have to make adjustments where we are going forward. And that is part of being in government.
But is it sustainable for the long term?
Well, so whilst we are in power during the course of this Parliament, we have committed to it. And it would be unfair to do anything otherwise. This is a significant piece of assurance that we provide a part of the population, and for the course, while we've made a commitment, that will be there. Now, for the longer term, my constituents, mean age is about 36. We have very real discussions about how we spend and share our money, because it is really important that we actively engage in these discussions. But what I do look at, so I'm a service person, so I receive one of these pensions because that was what was part of my commitment to 25 years in the service. And for a poor lad in southeast London, that was a material reason why I entered into the service. And then we look at our service entrants at the moment. We look at our police. We look at our nurses and our doctors and the private sectors. We cannot remunerate our way out of encouraging those people into the sector. And if the upset is making sure that at the end of their time that you have a teacher that has invested 25, 30 years worth of career, and then we're going to hammer them because they're concerned about the cost of living as a result of just poor governance, let's be honest. That is not going to mean that anyone chooses to enter into that path. We should be making sure that the offer for young people into jobs that provide our society with the things that we need are adequately protected and controlled. And just look at the entry numbers now. We don't get police in through the door. We don't have nurses in through the door. All of these things used to have housing given to them. They used to have a very generous pension settlement, and all of those things were expected, and they're not there now. And
the pension settlement is in the public sector.
It is not for our young police officers and for our young nurses and doctors who can't afford to get into a house at the start of their journey.
No, but the pensions entitlements are still very beneficial for public sector workers.
They are, and for
teachers, 28.9% contribution.
But the remuneration, the things that they have to give up, and the remuneration over the course of their time in that role isn't comparable with the private sector.
Right, we'll move on to some other subjects. Sarah, thank you very much for that. It's 8:20.
This is LBC.
A southern train is a place where family moments become more peaceful. Where you can spread out and a game of I Spy gets a scenic upgrade with snacks, stories and the occasional sheep for a bonus point. Less stress, more yes with kids' tickets for £2 at southernrailway.com. Terms apply.
Half term is here. I've 100% got this. They will keep a lid on the glitter and they will not ambush my work calls. But if all else fails, McDonald's Deal Drop.
Get 15% off the whole menu when you spend £15 on food and drink. Redeem this half term only on the McDonald's app. Fees apply to delivery. 18 plus, one-time use per week until the 2nd of November. Participating restaurants, T's and C's apply.
It's the last chance to get yourself a ticket for Wednesday's Lotto draw.
It could be you.
Lotto from the National Lottery. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 18 or over.
40 million people listen to commercial radio each week. That's 80 million ears, give or take. Amplify your advertising at radiocentre.org.
Buying a home on a holiday park was the retreat you always wanted. But then came unexpected site fee increases. And that was before the dramatic loss in value. If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK, you may have been missold. holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive thousands in compensation. Text ASSIST to 78900. That's ASSIST to 78900.
Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
22 minutes past 8. Baroness Rachel Maclean is here from the Conservatives. Calvin Bailey, MP for Labour. Liam Halligan for the Planet Normal podcast.
Hey! Featuring you this week, Iain.
It does indeed.
Did we mention that?
We did mention it. We won't mention it again because we don't want to be accused of whatever. Jemma Forte is a broadcaster and she hosts the podcast The Trawl.
Hey, there's my way.
I've never been on that.
I'm on it next week, right?
Right, let's move on to another question. It's a text question from Terry in Great Yarmouth. Do you approve of British troops being sent to Gaza? Now, the Defence Secretary, John Healey, has revealed this evening that a senior commander and a small number of armed forces personnel have been sent to Israel to be part of an international coalition monitoring the ceasefire in Gaza after a request from Trump's government. Forces from Egypt, Qatar, Turkey and the UAE, along with the US itself, will be involved, though Vice President J.D. Vance has confirmed that American forces will not enter Gaza at any point, but presumably British forces will. Well, there we go. Calvin, I think we should start with you on this one.
Thank you. Well, and this is the difficult thing. Like, we have arrived at the very difficult moment when we realise that peace isn't quite as we always perceive it, because there is a danger that peace has to genuinely be agreed by both sides, and peacekeeping forces have to be invited in. So you cannot have a situation where peace enforcement is a thing. You uphold a peace, you can't impose it. So if there are armed people that you consider to be terrorists in that in that place, then that is not a place that we invite our soldiers. What I should imagine has been requested is that we use our military planning expertise and we use the leadership that our military has, and will be able to provide a broader coalition that is invited in to support and sustain the peace that we hope will persist in Gaza.
But in the end, it isn't a peacekeeping force if it doesn't enter the territory, surely.
Well, it's peacekeeping. There is a peacekeeping force sat in Whitehall called the Ministry of Defence. So a peacekeeping force has a multiplicity of layers. So you will provide some things to that force. They might just not be the soldiers wearing blue berets on the ground with weapons. So it's important that we contribute to these things, because we are a global leader in this regard, and it's important that we offer our experience. But what we won't do, and I'm sure won't be the case, is put people in harm's way.
Okay, Jemma.
I saw on Instagram yesterday, like my feed is full of it, and there were 11 Palestinians killed in a van. Apparently they'd crossed a yellow line. It seemed very chaotic. It's very difficult, I think, for anybody to know where this yellow line is supposed to be. There were lots of children in it. There was a woman wailing because her child, she couldn't recognise whether it was her son or her daughter. It was another really harrowing thing to witness that nobody should see on their phone being beamed into their eyes. And I have seen thousands and thousands and thousands of things like this. And I think that's the reason people are going, why aren't people celebrating the ceasefire? How can you celebrate after 2 years of what we've seen? You can't. And it is incredibly fragile. And the rhetoric that I've seen from the likes of Smotrich and Gavir, which is just, let's finish it off, let's carry on. This is real estate. Let's get in there and finish killing them. And it's really hard because Labour have been complicit by providing weapons. And I really think that for Starmer and the Labour Party, it's their Iraq. I think it's whatever your party does now, there will be many, many, many people who feel like me. I could never vote for your party with Starmer as a leader.
Would you not also say, though, I mean, you've mentioned that bus, and I've seen those pictures too.
Yeah, I think there's 2 Israeli soldiers. I read about that.
But there's also Hamas fighters who are killing collaborators.
Now, yes, what I will say is a lot of that, and on either side, there seems to be a lot of propaganda. All I know. Yeah, but you're
just talking about the
yes,
anti-Israeli
so of course,
propaganda, aren't you?
Anybody being killed. Anybody killed is vile. I'm a peace-loving person. This isn't about sides. However, in my view, this idea that you exterminate everybody in Gaza and you therefore get rid of Hamas is for the birds. Because I think, that's what Israel have been saying. Yeah, who are in the Israeli government. And I feel like the things that children and people have witnessed and suffered, you are going to, unfortunately, in the long term, radicalise people. It's very frightening.
Rachel.
So when I was a minister, we had to go and attend Cobra quite often, which is the kind of government security. I don't know if anybody else has.
I have.
You have, yeah. So you will know that you hear from the heads of the armed forces, and they actually come and they brief you, and they say, this is the reason for this operation. This is something that's completely classified. Nobody else can know about it. These are the reasons why we're doing it. They're interrogated, and the decision is then made in the room, and then they basically go and do it. And my view always was that these were highly experienced professionals. And if they were briefing ministers and they said there needs to be an operation, we need to protect the peace of our allies or assets somewhere, obviously, as ministers, we needed to respect that. And I had the utmost respect for members of the armed services that I worked with during my tenure. I was never actually a defence minister. I don't have a deep expertise in defence matters at all, or foreign affairs. But my default view was, these are the people whose job it is to protect our national security and keep our citizens safe at home and abroad. And so if the decision has been made in that way, which I'm absolutely sure it has, because they're not politicised at all, in my experience, then it's right that we support them. Of course, we recognise that they're going into a very dangerous situation, but that's what they do. That's what they sign up to do that.
Liam.
Well, the briefing alongside Defence Secretary John Healey's words today is that British troops won't be operating inside the Gaza Strip. But then again, on the other hand, it wasn't much more than a week ago that Yvette Cooper was saying that we wouldn't be deploying at all, or there were no plans for us to be deploying at all. So it's clearly a fast-moving situation. Look, in an ideal world, we wouldn't be where we are, and I totally understand the emotions stirred by this issue on both sides, and there are ongoing extremists operating on both sides trying to break the ceasefire. I think you have to hand it, without wishing to be Panglossian in any way, over optimistic, you have to hand it to Donald Trump that at least some progress has been made. We can all roll our eyes on that, but fair-minded people on a humanitarian level have to be grateful that at least some progress towards some kind of ceasefire has been made.
He could have pulled the plug.
If I could just finish, thank you. Obviously, it's going to be very, very difficult, as Vice President Vance said today, because there are vested interests on both sides who want this war to continue. War is an industry. War is, a lot of people's careers, and that's a really, really unfortunate thing. But that's the reality. In general, I think you have to be realistic about this. The UK does maintain, still a very significant armed forces. It's much, much smaller than it was. I've got many friends in the armed forces who talk to me about this all the time. I was at the funeral of Charles Guthrie last week, former Chief Defence Staff. I know lots of people in the military, and I know we're upset that our military is denuded to the extent that it has been, but it is still very significant. On the intelligence side, we are still world class in many ways. And if the UK is going to be a responsible major world power, even though there are so many other calls on our budget, we do have to play a part in trying to bring about or monitor and some kind of peace in the Middle East, given the massive ramifications beyond the on-the-ground humanitarian ramifications of ongoing conflict.
Trump could have pulled the plug whenever he wanted to. He always has had the power to do that. And if you saw that disgusting speech the other day where he was in Egypt talking to Netanyahu, smirking, and he told him, yeah, you use the weapons really well. You use the weapons well. It turned my stomach. So I don't feel grateful to him for anything.
On that bombshell, let's go to the news headlines. It's 8:31. Here's Darrell Jackson.
Britain has sent a senior commander and a small number of troops to Israel to help monitor a fragile Gaza ceasefire. It follows an American request barely a week since the Foreign Secretary said the UK had no plans to deploy soldiers. The White House says it's halted work on a summit between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. It follows reports the US president had suggested Ukraine should surrender the entire eastern Donbass region last week. And the Chancellor has insisted there is no recession on the horizon following warnings from economists. There has been speculation that Rachel Reeves is preparing to announce a blitz of tax increases and cuts to spending at the budget next month. LBC weather: showers easing this evening, a few lingering along western coasts, lows of 3 degrees.
LBC.
We had our smart meter installed a year ago, and it's made things so much easier. Not having to submit meter readings or having to deal with estimated bills is great.
A smart meter sends meter readings direct to your energy supplier. It means you get accurate bills, not estimated bills, and you don't even need an internet connection. Call your energy supplier to request a smart meter today.
Real testimonials voiced by actors. Eligibility may vary.
Swollen gums, bad breath, bleeding whilst brushing. All signs of potential gum disease, a major cause of tooth loss. At Darwood & Tanner, our expert periodontists can help restore your gums and save your teeth. Using a range of cutting-edge procedures, from minimally invasive to advanced corrective surgery, we ensure that you are always in the best hands. For our most comprehensive, tailored and complete gum disease treatments, visit darwoodandtanner.co.uk.
I'm fulfilling more international orders thanks to working capital support.
Export insurance protects my business against the risk of not getting paid by an overseas buyer.
At UK Export Finance, we help businesses export with confidence. Between 2024 and 2025, we provided over £14 billion of government-backed finance and insurance to help businesses grow overseas. Search UK Export Finance to find out how we could help you win export contracts, fulfil orders, and get paid.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
Let me reintroduce my panel to you. Liam Halligan is an economist. He writes the Sunday Telegraph economic agenda column and hosts the Planet Normal podcast with Alison Pearson. Jemma Forte, broadcaster, co-host of the podcast The Trawl. Calvin Bailey, Labour MP for Leyton and Wanstead, former RAF wing commander. And Baroness Rachel Maclean, Conservative peer, former director of strategy for Kemi, Badenoch and former housing minister. Right, let's go to our next question. It's from David. It's a WhatsApp question. The government is ordering the investigation of so-called crimes committed by British SAS soldiers in the fight against the Provisional IRA, while at the same time planning to send UK peacekeeping forces to Ukraine in future. Is this likely to hurt recruitment to the armed forces? Now, just a bit of background to this. There are plans to resume a long-term, dormant inquest into the killing of heavily armed IRA insurgents. Now, we call them terrorists, shall we, because that's what they are, or were, by SAS soldiers in 1987, despite a 2011 investigation by the Police Service of Northern Ireland finding that the troops were within their rights to kill the men. Calvin, let's come back to you on this.
Okay, well, there's... So I suppose the question is, or that's been put, is whether we whether historical or dealing with historical issues alters people's calculus for joining the military right now. I would hope that people that join the military or that serve our country in whatever way, and the same is true of the police and any other service, that they believe in the right, in the rule of law, and that they hope that their actions are accountable, regardless of like whether that is now or in the future. So no, I don't think these things will impact joining the service. I think it's important that we uphold our standards and that we make sure that our soldiers are treated in an honest and fair way. I think the Northern Ireland Bill, what was promised to our soldiers, or what was put out to say that we could apply amnesty, meant that there was a whole load of UK families whose family members had been killed by terrorists were denied or would be denied justice. And to pretend that we were doing something for one group of people and not removing justice from an equally large body of people, I think it's something like 250 service families, is just was false, and the previous government should never have allowed itself into that position. And so right now, and during the course of my 25 years, I always make sure, and all the people that I served with in line with the law, were very proud of it, and got very upset when we saw injustices. So no, I don't think our entrance nowadays will be put off by other people's perceptions of justice.
Now, does anybody else want to come in on this? I suspect none of you are particular experts in this area, unless I'm wrong.
I'd like to mention something, if I may. So, as you know, Ian, you know me very, very well over many years. I'm from an Irish Catholic background. My father's from the west of Ireland. Halligan's an Ulster name originally. We went down to Mayo just in time for the famine in the 19th century. And there's something to be said for why do we keep dredging up all these problems of the past, and can't we all just move on and post the Good Friday Agreement? Northern Ireland's in so much better shape. Belfast is a fantastic city to visit these days. Increasingly, it's getting a reputation as a great place to go and invest, and all that is wonderful. On the other hand, I should say that when David Cameron, in one of his first acts as Prime Minister in 2010, apologised for Bloody Sunday, 38 years on, that had an absolutely massive positive impact. I can't put it into words how positive the impact on relations between Britain and Ireland and Northern Ireland and the rest of the island of Ireland were. So reconciliation and truth does have its time and its place. But now we're getting to the point where we are so many years on, and there will have to be a cut-off at some point.
Well, maybe that's the answer.
And I say that with enormous regret. I've got enormous respect, actually, for Calvin's very nuanced and obviously very expert answer that he gave. But as a person of proud Irish origin, albeit a proud Brit as well, born in London, I do think at some stage, and I say this with regret and with huge apologies to families that are still impacted and still feel massive injustice, some of which will be literally related to not just by my ethnicity, but also proper family bonds. There has to come a point where we say that we have to close one chapter of history in order to make good the next chapter of history.
But you can't have false. There are a number of protections. It's really important to note that there aren't repeated investigations. So our service.
Okay, let's go to another call. It's from Robin in Whitehaven. Robin, what would you like to ask?
I'd like to ask, should Jess Phillips resign from being the safeguarding minister? It seems some of the victims of the grooming don't have confidence in her, and one of them's actually called for her to resign. So should she resign?
3 survivors of the grooming gang scandal have resigned from the Survivors Liaison Panel, which was set up to work alongside the National Inquiry into grooming gangs, while one of the people reported to be a contender to become the chairman of the inquiry has withdrawn from the process, citing media scrutiny of her. I mean, this is, I think, incredible, where people who've been through this horrendous experience, they felt let down by the police, let down by local councils, let down by the judicial system, and now let down by politicians. Should Jess Phillips resign, Jemma?
Oh, I don't know. I totally agree with what you've just said. At the heart of this, these girls, honestly, what they've been through, and the fact that it hasn't been handled with absolute kid gloves, to lead to this, where it looks like it's going to collapse. I know Labour weren't really massively sort of full sort of chested about wanting to do it in the first place, but I know that Jess Phillips, her record prior to this, I know how much work she's done in terms of protecting women and domestic abuse, and throughout COVID I know she was working tirelessly.
She wasn't. It was all posturing. It was all about her. It was publicity. That's what it is with Jess Phillips.
20 years of working in refuges she has got quite a background.
She's got a background, but it's all about the Jess Phillips show. You just look at this issue here. She made such a lot of noise about some of these things when she's in opposition, but she's been completely unable. She had to be dragged kicking and screaming. Her and the rest of the Home Office ministers, including the Home Secretary at the time, had to be dragged to do these. They wanted to shove it under the carpet. Why? Because it was all their Labour council colleagues who were the ones that had turned a blind eye, and they feared upsetting all of those people who ran all those councils.
Did you not seek to take
Rotherham and all those other councils? It was all the Labour councils who hid it, who covered it up for years, and they were too frightened to take it on. Had it not been for the Conservatives making the running on this, Jess Phillips would be doing nothing, believe me.
All right, Calvin.
I find that despicable from someone that used this as a political football. I believe you sent an email out saying we've won when as though this was something to be proud of.
Yeah, one on behalf of getting justice for women who have been abused systematically.
Jess Phillips has an incredible background in this field. I can talk you through many cases that she has taken me and my constituents through to make sure that they're into a safe space. And I spoke to her in the corridors about this evening, and part of the reason why this is so difficult, and part of the reason that that we are seeing upset, is there is such a multiplicity of victims here, and that's who we should be concentrating on, is the fact that these people have suffered horrendously, and the discussion invariably is about the men and actually not about the people that were victims. And we are maybe a year into trying to bring about bring this process about. I think it took.
But you didn't want it. I mean, the point is, the
government did it. It wasn't that we didn't want it. We were waiting for Baroness Casey to find
that's simply not the case. The government made clear it did not want a national inquiry. Jess Phillips herself said it should all be about local inquiries.
Well, let's look how we've acted. We've got 1,200 cases that have been opened. I think we had 7 men prosecuted in the last couple of days. So we'll be judged on our actions, and our actions are that. There is 1,200 cases open.
So why did you not want a national inquiry in the first place?
We waited. I mean, you've had my answer. We waited for Baroness Casey for the experts to tell us how this should be dealt with, because the part of the thing with this is, and part of the reason why there's upset, is that these things are very sensitive, and the interactions that have been happening are in order to protect victims. And so
the victims seem to be blaming Jess Phillips
because of the interaction. So part of the discussions have been about ensuring that each of the that people don't encroach on the experiences of other people's. And at the moment, we haven't set and defined anything about the parameters of this case, but it will be.
But you've got also the putative chair of the inquiry also withdrawing from the process. So it's not just the victims.
But the chair of the inquiry. Go back and read your own notes. The chair is withdrawn because of undue scrutiny, and that is why this is so difficult, and that is why we are going to go about it in an appropriate.
But it's a shambles, isn't it?
It's a shambles.
Well, it's not. It's a year in. How long did it take you to set up? How long was the COVID inquiry?
You're in government now.
How long was the COVID
government now. It's your responsibility. You can't blame us. You are in government now.
And that's why we've got 1,200 people, 1,200 cases out.
So I first came across these child rape gangs, which is what we should call them. I don't know why we're calling them grooming gangs. Why should we be so euphemistic about it? and I'll never forget this, a series of conversations I had with the late, great Anne Cryer, Labour MP for Keighley, when I was a young political correspondent back in the late 90s. And she was literally in tears, her head in her hands, because her own party leadership wouldn't take this seriously. I agree with you. Both, the main parties that have been in power have washed their hands of this because of political correctness, fears, particularly in Labour's case, upsetting the Muslim vote upon which you depend very, very heavily in certain parts of the country. So these are the realities. If Elon Musk hadn't have got hold of this issue, I doubt we'd be in the position that we actually are. That's the reality. And I do think the Labour Party, well, it's on the record, it's in the papers, did try to suppress a national inquiry.
I don't think we didn't try to, but that's not wrong.
Can I just finish? Can I just finish?
But not try
you
to
make it sound less credible if you don't let people argue against you. Thank you. A lot of the reason Labour tried to suppress it was because the current leader was Director of Public Prosecutions when a lot of these things happened, and a lot of it happened in Labour constituencies. And in those constituencies, the Muslim vote is larger than your majority. These are the realities. Unless we get hold of this as a political class very, very quickly, the slither of credibility that our political and media class has over this, largely because of a few brave individuals like the late Times journalist Andrew Norfolk and others, let's hand it. You know my relationship with GB News, Ian. Hand it to GB News. Charlie Peters on GB News has done some incredible work getting this over the political line and making politicians have to face this.
Some of us on this station were talking about this as far back as 2011, 2012,
absolutely.
When a lot of the media did not want to talk about
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely, you were as
Jemma, I think you got slightly cut off in your first answer. Do you want to come back and say anything?
It's fine. It was interesting. I was listening. I don't think I've got anything more to say on this. I was just sort of feeling a bit depressed because it's sort of, I don't want to conflate the two things. And yet I was thinking on the train about this case and about... Then you've got Prince Andrew, and just time and time again, victims, their voices just fade away, and it's so incredibly sad. I know it's sort of two ends of a very different scale, but it isn't. What Epstein did was the same as these vile men, so...
OK. Right, we'll move on to maybe slightly cheerier subjects, or maybe not in a minute. It's 8:47.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents,
we have Virginia Giuffre's friend and co-author Amy Wallace telling us why she thinks the paedophile ring cover-up could yet be exposed. That's all for free on the Global Player app.
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
I like my private details on a need-to-know basis. In other words, I need to know them and you don't. That's why I use Bitdefender whenever I'm connected, working tirelessly in the background to protect me across all my devices, keeping my digital identity confidential, on the down low, on the hush-hush. Trusted by the experts, used by the pros.
Bitdefender, a global leader in cybersecurity. Trusted always.
Verify now at bitdefender.com.
Hello, I'm a National Lottery scratch card. Over 5 people a second win with me. Ooh. That's like 30 winners since I started talking. Oh, 12 more. 14. 21!
Is there a win in store for you? Play a National Lottery scratch card today. Winners is an average. Search Dream Big, Play Small. Rules apply. Players must be 18 or over.
At Pets in a Pickle, we're here when it matters most. For fuss-free pet insurance policies as unique as they are, visit petsinnerpickle.co.uk.
You have 30 seconds to defuse a bomb. But it isn't any bomb. It's a chemical weapon filled with poisonous gas, planted by a serial killer. You need quiet. But your ears never stop ringing. You haven't slept properly in months.
Oh, God.
You're on the edge. And you've only got 3 seconds left. Trigger Point returns October 26 on ITV1 and ITVX. Hold your breath.
I'm telling you, raise taxes, that's how.
Cut spending, less waste, more sense.
Move north, get more for your money.
Until winter hits your heating bill.
Fair.
Up to 9.13% annual return. We all agree that's strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard to ignore.
Cufflink. Auto invest property backed from £500. Visit cufflink.com. That's KUFLINK. Register your interest today. Your capital is at risk. Tax rules apply to IF ISAs and may be subject to change. Cufflink is authorised and regulated by the FCA.
Cross Question with Iain Dale. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
10 to 9, Rachel Maclean, Calvin Bailey, Liam Halligan and Jemma Forte with us answering your questions. Here's a text question from Monty in Nottingham. The President-elect of the Oxford Union lost his vote of confidence today. Does the panel think this punishment for what he said about Charlie Kirk's assassination was unjust, and how uncouth of him to reject his defeat? Agree or disagree? Because apparently he's refused to quit. Now, the incoming president of the Oxford Union Debating Society, George Aberone, has lost a confidence vote over comments on a WhatsApp group in which he appeared to be celebrating the killing of Charlie Kirk, writing "Charlie Kirk got shot, LOOOL," or laughing out loud, obviously, along with his "let's effing go." Mr. Aberone has disputed the result, claiming the poll was compromised. Do we have any Oxford graduates in the room tonight?
Afraid we do.
Rachel, let's go to you first then.
I mean, this is quite a niche issue, as you allude to. Not a lot of people will have been following. I mean, not a lot of people will be able
Did
to
you get a
vote
vote in
it.
this?
I did get a vote, yes. And I actually voted no confidence in him. And it's a democratic organisation and he should accept it. I mean, what he did, in my view, was disgraceful. And so I was given a vote and I voted for him to be removed. And in my view, that's what should happen.
Liam?
I did have a vote, but I didn't exercise it. I do think that he...
Why?
Because I didn't get round to it, to be honest with you. I do think he should have been no confidence as the president of the Oxford Union. It's one of the most well-known free speech debating societies in the world, and you can't celebrate the assassination of somebody who you've recently debated. It's beyond.
Yeah, that's really what I thought was
beyond. It's beyond the pale.
And met him as well.
I don't think he should be, as the Oxford vernacular goes, sent down. I don't think he should lose his place at the university, but I do think he should accept gracefully now his defeat, because otherwise he is doing him and his careers going forward very great damage. I give him that advice for free. And also I think Oxford University itself has been pretty mealy-mouthed about this. They can say, wash their hands of it, it's a student-run society, it's not us. But they're a grown-up institution, and their press office and their Vice Chancellor, by the way, one William Hague, should have had something to say about this, because it is one of the world's most famous universities. The world is watching. It is a bastion of free speech within our country, which is a bastion of free speech.
So why shouldn't he be allowed to say what he likes then?
Because what he said was so incendiary and so outrageous. And how can you possibly be a supporter of free speech if you're celebrating the murder of somebody who's practicing free speech?
Okay. Jemma.
Well, that's a sort of exhausting thing, because then you have the free speech to say what you want about the free speech, blah, blah, blah. I just think everybody has impulses to things that people say, and words really, really matter. And I thought that Charlie Kirk, many of the things that he said and did was repugnant. But I remember the day that he was shot, I was doing something on YouTube and it happened. And I think it's pretty weird to have any other reaction other than, oh my goodness, how horrifying.
Well, particularly if you've met him.
Well, yeah, which I didn't. But yeah, I guess so. I guess that does make it even more sort of meaningful. But hopefully as a human, you can empathise anyway, just anyone getting shot in that way. It was so violent. So I think, you should be able to separate something's happened that's horrific, not express that on a WhatsApp. Take a moment, what you think about the person is perhaps a separate issue.
Yes.
Well, it is a separate issue, yes. But it is quite the irony of the free speech thing. It goes round and round and round, doesn't it?
It is. I mean, that what he should understand is the power of freedom of speech. This isn't a niche issue, because this is about the normalisation of violence, sort of political violence, and our...
You're slightly I mean, I accept I said those words. What I meant, not a lot of people have a vote. It's not like your election or a general election.
I get that, but part of the problem and the point that kind of I hope we would all agree is that what's powerful about a debating society is that you go out and you use words
in a clever way,
and at the end of it you walk away hoping to have gained something and hope that the power of your argument takes you there, and that's what this institution is about. I happened to win the debate there last year about the...
Get you? I've always
good.
refused their invitations.
Well, I think
mainly because I'm on the radio.
Maybe I should have done, but boy from South London wanted to just leave my mark on an institution. But I think it is really important that we must explain to our young people just how dangerous our language can be, because this normalises it. Because the moment you say it on either the left or the right, you normalise it across the whole spectrum.
There have to be sort of social filters.
Yeah. Now, I've got to ask for short answers on this one. Neil in Horsham says, Robert Jenrick says the burqa should be banned. Well, he didn't quite say that. He said he would probably support banning it. While another Tory MP wants people who came here legally to be deported. What happened to the decent Conservative Party of so many generations and so many great leaders? Now, the Conservative Shadow Justice Secretary said he probably would ban the burqa during a radio phone-in this morning, while Conservative backbench MP, I think she's a frontbencher, Katie Lamb told the Sunday Times that legal immigrants living in the UK who've settled status should go home in the interest of making this country what she called more culturally coherent. Are you listening, Enoch Powell? Rachel Maclean.
Do you know what? I mean, look, I hate this kind of question because I'm being asked about comments by somebody that I didn't see the comments, I didn't hear them.
Well, I've just told you what they were.
And I don't know what the context was, I don't know what else was discussed. And
you're not getting it out of it.
You're putting one thing to me and you're asking me there is definitely a case for banning or removing the burqa from certain situations.
So you believe in free speech but not freedom of expression?
No, that's not the case. I think you're twisting what I said. Yes, I believe in free speech. If you're suggesting
should women not be allowed to dress how they want?
It's a nuanced argument. Some women would like to wear the burqa. That's fine. I don't really believe that. I think that it's a coercion because that's often how it's expressed. So I'm not a fan of wearing the burqa. I've heard people say that they choose to wear it. Good for them. I'm not an expert on this matter, but I do think there's very important situations where you should not be wearing the burqa, such as if you're a teacher in a school, such as if you're giving evidence in court, and many other situations. You know, we are a Western country. This is a cultural practice that does not sit well with our traditions, and I think that a lot of people would agree with that stance. It has to be implemented carefully and all the rest of it. So I think you have to look at it in the round. I think Kemi was asked about that. She's been asked about that a few times. And I think she's got quite a nuanced view on it.
Well, she doesn't agree with that.
Doesn't agree with what?
Well, banning
it.
The burqa.
Yeah, because there's freedom of expression, again.
I don't see why any politician should tell a woman what she can or can't wear. Why should Robert Jenrick control what a woman wears?
But also, I mean, the quote from Katie Lamb...
I think the point here, to be honest, is that those women are being controlled by their husbands.
No, that's absolutely
How about in court?
I mean, come on, they are.
But you can't do a broad brushstroke like that. And if Robert Jenrick is so concerned about those women, then okay, fine, work with those women in a different way, but don't just
work with them.
Weaponise it. You know what he's doing.
With them. It's a whole religious and cultural outlook. You can't work with them.
Yeah, but Robert Jenrick,
they want to bring their own traditions to our country.
You know why he's saying it. He's gone very strange.
I don't think he has gone very strange. I think he's
Amber Rudd does. She was sitting there last week and said, I don't know what's happened to him. He wasn't like that. Amber Rudd.
He's gone very race-baity.
When he was her PPS, he said he would never have said these things.
People are allowed to change their views. The world has changed, Ian. People are allowed to change their view in response to the things that we see now. What about the Katie
Lamb comments? I mean, they're an absolute disgrace, aren't they?
Oh, come on. I don't know what she said. What did she say?
Well, let me repeat it to you then. She says she told the Sunday Times that legal immigrants living in the UK who have settled status should, quote, go home in the interest of making this country what she called more culturally coherent. Those are words that Enoch Powell could have uttered.
No, I don't think that's the case. We have a policy now. We have a Conservative policy whereby we want to restrict immigration to this country. We recognise.
But what about people who are living here already? I mean, she's saying they should be deported.
Well, I don't think she did say that.
Well,
I'd have to read it.
All right,
but, fine.
I do think there are...
Briefly, please.
Yeah, I do think there are situations where you shouldn't be able to wear a burqa. if you're giving evidence in court, if you're teaching, if you're administering medicine, for instance. I don't think that's a freedom of speech thing. I think your freedom of expression is overturned by the situation that you find yourself in or have chosen to be in, teaching in those professions, or if you're required by law to give evidence in court, though I appreciate the position is very, very nuanced. I wouldn't agree with Katie Lamb based on the quote that you've given, Iain, but I would say when people are here illegally, then the state does have a duty.
But that's not what she was saying.
Sure. And I've just said I didn't agree with it. But let's not lose sight of the fact that when people are here illegally, it is really undermining the confidence of ordinary mainstream people, particularly, women and their safety, that people are here undocumented and they need to be removed.
People that wear burqas are any less normal or mainstream. I mean, this is the problem with this, is that what Robert is doing in his pathetic attempt to climb over his present party leader is using issues around race to draw in. He is playing into the algorithms because these things, this type of political discourse, every time he puts a post out, something like that, it will be surrounded with hate-filled posts that will amplify his initial message, which is just on the fringes. Okay. And as a result, we are seeing a significant increase in the amount of open racism on the streets of our countries at the moment.
Stretch to blame it on Robert. We've just had a Tommy Robinson-led march. Tommy Robinson was watching you.
All right. We're going to go to our fun question, thank goodness.
What would you like to do with
Helen in Bristol says, stargazers are being told to look out for a spectacular annual meteor shower this evening, and many people will be taking their blankets out into their gardens or even onto hillsides to get some great views of it. What would you happily sit in the garden all night to see, however chilly it might get out there? And any of you that mention the word dogging...
You just judged it.
Calvin.
Oh, goodness me first. Well, it depends. It would be lovely back in the day. You could sit on top of Shooters Hill when you could see the stars. But nowadays, light pollution, LED lights, it would be a real struggle too, which is a real shame.
Gemma?
World peace.
Oh my God!
I don't know. Do you know what? Nothing.
So
nothing. I like my nice bedroom. There's lots of foxes in my garden. I'd probably get weed on. Don't want that.
I've never seen anyone being weed on by a fox. Liam.
It's the first time for everything.
Well, I like, particularly this time of year when it's getting a little bit colder. There's nothing like sitting outside if you're lucky enough to have a garden big enough, around a campfire, maybe strumming a guitar, drinking a few beers with your friends. I think it's a wonderful thing to do.
We all get invited
It's
round to yours.
life-affirming.
Rachel.
And I was in the Scouts.
I was in the Scouts too, campfire and s'mores and all that, but also I'd love to see the Northern Lights, so I'd stay up for that.
Don't think you'd find that in Redditch, would you?
Sadly not. Although I think they did see them, at some point last year, but I was voting. And
OK, thank you very much indeed to you all. Now, on tomorrow's panel, we have the former Conservative Cabinet Minister Sir Ranil Jayawardena, the climate policy campaigner Scarlett Westbrook, and the Labour MP Sarah Smith. Now, we're slightly late to the news on LBC, but coming up after the news, we are going to talk about... Well, do you remember that Adamant song, Goody Two Shoes?
Don't drink, don't smoke.
Exactly. Why is it that so many people don't drink, they don't smoke, and if they do drink, they drink non-alcoholic drinks? Are you one of them? Have you made a conscious decision not to drink alcohol? Because I think a lot of pubs, a lot of beer companies are tearing their hair out because so many people are going for non-alcoholic alternatives. Have you made a conscious decision to do that yourself? And if so, why? 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, British troops have been sent to Israel to help monitor a fragile ceasefire in the Middle East following a request from the US. The Defence Secretary says it's a deployment of a small number of planning officers, including a senior commander. It comes 10 days after the Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper said the UK had no plans to send soldiers. Labour MP Calvin Bailey, a former RAF wing commander, told LBC, "We've